It comes into a river that empties into a Great Lake. This is the biggest one, which is amazing.
6,000 square miles of rivershed.
6,000.
Wow.
Incredible. So who knows where the Maumee begins? Fort Wayne. Yep. The St. Mary, the St. Joe River come together, but they come in at an odd angle, as do many of the tributaries, and that's because this river used to flow the other way. What? You're making that up. No, there was a glacier sitting here. They say a mile high. Now, I don't know who they are. And no one was around. Some Native Americans actually were there toward the end of it. You know, they say there was at least a mile of ice above us. Anyway, that's kind of heavy, right? So it ground everything down. In fact, if you go out to Kelly's Island, if you've ever been there, you can see the glacial grooves in the limestone from where the weight of the glacier pushing the boulders along left those striations. Truth be told, if you went down here to the bedrock, to the limestone, you'd see the same thing. Right? You can see it in Sylvania, we used to see it as kids. So all of it is there. So the glacier starts to melt. Global warming comes and goes, whatever you want to call it. And glaciers got as far as Cincinnati area. Anybody been to Cincinnati? What's the landform like? Right. The 7 hills of Cincinnati. So the glacier essentially stopped advancing there, and then the climate warmed and it started retreating. So all those hills are what we call glacial till. So all the stuff that was in the glacier as it melted just sort of dropped it there. So everything, our entire landscape is pretty much created by those glaciers as they came over. It's one of the reasons we're so flat, right? Because they scraped everything off. So what is now the Maumee River was actually a meltwater river, because all this mile high of glacier is melting. There's water everywhere, right? Has to have somewhere to go, so it creates a channel flowing out to the west, the south and the west. And if you look at the tributaries that are coming into it, most of them are at opposite angle of what you think they would be, because it flowed the other way originally. It's a crazy thing, but very cool. So, yeah, the Rocky Mountains are great, but wow, what a story we have. You just have to know, right? So there it is. Anyway, so we end up with this magnificent river. It's a highway of history, right? Every human group, starting with the Native Americans, used this as the major highway. This was the I-75 of what became Northwest Ohio, right, over the turnpike. There were no roads. This is how people came in and out. Over time, obviously, the roads developed. But up until even in the 1800s, this was the major source of transportation. And it was an area that was hotly contested. Native Americans, the French, the British, the Americans, everybody wanted this. We might even have a panel that talks about this. Hey, there we go.
How about a knee?
Shannon, the Vanna of the Metropark. It's a long, 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 amazing story. Fort Meigs, Fallen Timbers, you've all heard of those things, all play into this. The short of it is everybody wanted it because it was such an incredible connection. You could go to Fort Wayne, and there's a very short portage that's even shorter in the spring when the water's high, to get over into the Wabash River system, which flows into the Mississippi via the Ohio River. So this is the great connector. Native Americans can go up to Fort Wayne, portage their canoes into another watershed altogether, and get into the Mississippi. Gad. Mississippi is like the mother of all rivers in this country. You can go up into Canada, you can go down to the Gulf of Mexico. That's your superhighway, right? That's like I-75 on steroids. You know, everybody's on it, and this is one of the ways to get there. Not the only way. There were a lot of other rivers that you could do that with. Comes to mind the River Raisin, for example. You could follow that up into Jackson County, and there were short portages to the Grand River, which flows westward. So there were lots of ways you could do it, but this was one of the major ones. So it's one of the reasons this was so important. Long story short, the Americans had this thing called the Revolution. And don't forget about the War of 1812. That was another one that, we almost lost this. The Brits and the Native Americans felt that the Ohio River was the appropriate boundary between the new United States and what became known as the Northwest Territory. Americans didn't see it that way. The British are pissed. They come in, they burn down Washington, D.C., the White House, the Capitol. For God's sake, this is a big deal. So the Revolutionary War really ended right in this part of the country with the War of 1812. That treaty is signed in 1815. It has held ever since. That boundary between the U.S. and Canada is one of the longest non-contested boundaries in the history of the world, which is kind of cool. Been there since 1815, so over 200 years. That opens this area to settle. Not that it wasn't settled. Of course, the Native Americans were here by the thousands, living off the land in this part of the Northwest Ohio. And then the French came. The French built some structures and things, but they weren't a huge presence architecturally or economically. The Brits came. They were sort of the same way, although they tended to build bigger forts. But then when the land is finally conceded to the U.S. in 1850, the American settlers start flooding in. And you see all these little river towns, Maumee, Harrisburg, a little bit later Grand Rapids, Waterville. That's when they all start popping up. The two initial towns here, as you probably all know, were Port Lawrence, which is right around where we are, and Vistula, which is down where LaGrange intersects Summit. Those are two little rival towns. They merged in 1837. And there you are. There you have it. The booming population of Toledo at the time was 2,000 people. Holy moly. Okay, so that's the short story for the long history. You can read these. These are really nice. You can't have them, but you can read them.
Somebody tried.
They took one and we figured, well, if they wanted the picture that bad, they must have an interest in history or something. Probably their
I
grandma
really
was
like
in the
Jeeps.
picture.
I'm pretty sure it was a Jeep picture. So
Grandma was a Jeeper. Anyway, what happens then is slowly the land around here gets filled in, right? And it makes it more accessible for development. So much so that at a certain point in the mid-1800s, Toledo became the third largest rail center in the United States. On the very land that you are on, there was a hotel here called the Island House. We might think this is a new idea, but the trains actually came right into the building. You could get off in the building and walk to your room. And so this building itself, when we're in, is sort of designed as a train shed, just to kind of recall that, which is really, really cool. But if you look at it, it's the 1850s when this is going on. Toledo's a big deal, really a big deal. It's also a major shipping port, and that continues very strongly. We kind of glossed over the canals. We really shouldn't, but because the Miami Area Canal, actually one of the places that emptied into the river was right down here, where Swan Creek is. It actually went into Swan Creek, you can see right here, and then down the river. Now, if you look at some of these later, and even these, you realize, so the area industrialized tremendously. The river was thought of mostly in its industrial form, a place to bring in cargo. We were a break and bulk point, meaning a lot of the grain and other produce that was created out in the agricultural areas was brought to Toledo and then loaded on ships. Likewise, other things came in. Ford Industry Square, the block of brick buildings, that lower level on Water Street, which is called Water Street because it was the water. The boats could pull right up there and unload their goods into the lower level, and that was called the break and bulk point. So let's say you bring in a car, you could order, let's say you want to have a dinner party. Fancy. You live in a nice house on Summit Street. And you want to order the finest English bone china. You can do that. Not a problem. You know, you send a letter to the supplier in London, they get your order ready, they put it on a boat, crosses the ocean, gets on a packet boat in New York City, comes up the Albany River to Albany, or the Hudson River to Albany, comes across the Miami-Erie Canal, or the Erie Canal, hooks up to Lake Erie, comes across there, and right here, you can get on the Miami-Erie Canal, which takes you all the way to Cincinnati. And we're talking the middle 1830s and 40s. So, tremendous opportunity. So your dinner party is successful. You just have to plan 6 months ahead, maybe 8. So like if there's a hurricane on the ocean, you're out of luck because the ship goes down and all your wonderful china is in there. So you reorder. You contact all your friends and say, well, we're going to have to do this in the fall rather than the spring. Eventually you get it. There have been quite a bit of archaeology, even some that the Metroparks has done, uncovering these pieces of china and silverware that were here. We know they weren't made here. They were shipped over from anywhere in Europe. So think about that. You could get something from anywhere because of the lake, the river, and the canal. And then what supplants the canal? What's the next big transportation? The railroads, right? And Toledo buys into that big time. In fact, the first railroad west of the Alleghenies, what they call the Erie and Kalamazoo Railroad, is right here, just a quarter of a mile away, was the depot. Erie and Kalamazoo was supposed to run to the Kalamazoo River, near Kalamazoo, not in Kalamazoo, because it wanted to connect up the Kalamazoo River, which flows west into the Mississippi River system, with the Great Lakes watershed system. So, all these things are coming together, which is really kind of amazing when you think about the history. And so the railroads then take off, and we do become one of the largest in the country. They say the third. Could have been the second, could have been the 45th. It's not important. We were a big rail center, and millions and millions and millions of pounds of cargo shipped in and out of this port, and still is. I don't know if there's a freighter coming in today, but if you go up here, the Cargill elevators, which you probably see from the other side when we go out to the dock, is really pretty impressive. So all of that history is wrapped up here. You can see why this is a place where you would build a big hotel because lots of people were coming in. Remember, too, how did people travel back then?
Horse.
Horse, or you walked. Or maybe later you did a streetcar. So we have huge numbers of traveling salesmen. Think the musicals include music. We got trouble right here in Toledo. So anyway, all those traveling salespeople are coming in. They need a place to stay, and they need to rent a horse to get around. Right? So they come in here, they get off the train, they go up to their room, or the warehouse district here was just peppered with buildings that had second and third stories with just a single room. Some of them had another human that accompanied that room, but you had to pay extra for that. So, particularly along Southside, but we won't talk about it. Anyway, so you've got this huge influx of people wanting to sell goods and buy goods, and so they're fanning out all around here.
I'm just trying to agitate.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
And it's pretty amazing that the size of the community. Now, long story short, everything starts to dwindle, right? Whether for a whole variety of reasons, not the least of which is the Depression. Toledo was hit extremely hard by the Depression. We were a working person's town, had a lot of union labor, and the Depression just killed it. Partially because we were so heavily invested in automotive, right? Well, there ain't a whole lot of people except the wealthy people who are buying bought cars in the Depression. So there's not a call for it. In some ways, Toledo really never recovered from it, which is kind of interesting. It still suffered for many, many years. World War II was a boost industrially, certainly, and that's when you start getting these huge factories along the river. Everything's still along the river. But it also, the other problem that happened, of course, is that the river becomes kind of a dumping ground, as we know. It became very, very polluted because everybody, in the old days, there weren't any garbage trucks, right? Stuff went in the outhouse, went under the porch, threw out in the back 40, or you took it somewhere in the city dump and dumped it. So there was a lot of pollution, and industry unfortunately saw the river as a way to get rid of all of their waste, and so it just, much of it flowed into the river, made it very polluted. Of course, we're turning that around, as we know, and that's sort of what leads us to this section of land, which essentially became abandoned. I don't even think there were any structures left when you guys got it. I mean, there were some foundations. Underground. But all of the structures that had been here, and you'll see some of them up here, were demolished, right, or burned. And so here's this big, huge chunk of land that's just sitting here right on the riverfront. After Toledo sort of rediscovered its riverfront, which was really the 1960s. Anybody remember Betty Mock? I'm sure some of you.
Betty Mock.
Betty Mock. So Betty is not individually responsible, but she was the lightning rod that said, what are we doing? Our riverfront is one of the most beautiful assets in the city, and it's loaded with industrial abandoned buildings. Duh. So she kept pushing and pushing and pushing city, county, state, feds, and eventually we got what is known today as Promenade Park out of that. And suddenly people came down to the waterfront and they're like, hey, this is pretty cool. I want to see more of this. Middlegrounds Metropark is more of this. I'm turning it over to Stan.
So, my